My letter to the president. President Joe Biden, I heard you speak all of these things about justice and equality. And when I look at your first state that you presided over for decades, and I see the corruption that goes on within the criminal legal system here, you've got the bully pulpit, the podium to where every American in the country can hear you. And yet you say nothing about this state. You say nothing about the high incarceration rates in this state, the fact that we don't have parole, the fact that these prisons engage in all manner of illegal practices to keep men in prison. You know, if you were serious about reform, why don't you pass that George Floyd Policing Act? Why don't you pass that or fight harder to pass that John Lewis voting rights bill? You know, you've been in politics for 50 years, and you are one of the chief architects of this mass incarceration epidemic. You were behind either sponsoring, co-sponsoring, or endorsing every major criminal law bill that helped fuel this epidemic of mass incarceration. You were behind that. For 50 years, you've been putting black men and women in prison. Why should I believe you now when you speak about justice and equality? Why should I believe you now? You spent your whole career putting people that look like me in prison. We have a nationwide police state in America. We have a nationwide police state, and we have a plethora of prisons, an entire prison industrial complex, all because of you, Mr. President. You allow your state to lock up its citizens without due process, without justice. This legislator in this state, which is headed by police. Most of our state senators are ex-police. A lot of the members of the House of Representatives, ex-police or they're pro-police sympathizers. And so all they do is pass laws and legislations that criminalize black communities. And any laws that deal with reform or depopulating Delaware's prisons. These people deny, they block, they don't even let them come to the floor for a vote. These judges are presiding over cases, sending men to prison, knowing that they haven't had their day in court, knowing that their rights have been violated. These prosecutors and these judges are engaging in all manner of misconduct against black and brown and poor white defendants. And yet you say nothing about this. You talk about diversifying the Supreme Court, but you haven't diversified Delaware courts. You mentioned the fact that you put the most black people in federal courts. You've appointed the most black judges to federal courts. When in Delaware, there's maybe a handful of judges. I can't even name one black judge in Delaware courts. And these white judges, they're old white men and women. They have bigoted mentalities. You know, they don't understand our issues. They don't come from our communities. They don't look like us, and they can't feel our pain. And yet these judges are tasked with determining the trajectories of our lives. You can't speak about justice and equality when your state boasts a 90% conviction rate, when it boasts a 65% recidivism rate, when it has over a 65% African American population in prison, and yet we only represent less than 20% of the general population. You can't talk about equality, Mr. President. You say nothing about these things that's going on in this state. They abolished parole because of the law that you helped pass. You know, prisoners here are required to spend 85% of their time, you know, whether they're guilty, whether they're not guilty, whether they're partially guilty. There are no programs in these jails. There are no educational opportunities. There's no vocational training opportunities, trade opportunities in these prisons, which is literally warehoused at the expense of taxpayers. You know, you had nominated a black woman as your vice president. You nominated a black woman on the Supreme Court, and I applaud that. and I'm grateful for that. But that's free form. That don't raise the standard of living for the millions of black people in America. That doesn't lower the poverty rate. That doesn't lower the mass incarceration rate. That doesn't feed those millions of black children who go home, black and brown children. These are fringe reforms. These are symbolic gestures that don't do anything for the broader population. I ask you, Mr. President, what is your beef with black people, in particular black men? You might have nominated these women to high positions in the government. But I noticed one thing, they both had white husbands. So I'm seeing a pattern with you. These decisions that you're making, they follow a trend of excluding black men from American civic society. We speak on these issues about Ukraine, what's going on, those atrocities that are being committed against those people. But you say nothing about the people in Yemen, the black and brown people that are being slaughtered by Saudi Arabia, who's using American-made weapons, who's using American-made planes that are maintenance by American contractors to kill and slaughter those people. You say nothing about the Rohingya Muslims, those black people in Myanmar, those brown people in Myanmar that are being slaughtered. You don't talk about the Ethiopians that are being slaughtered by the government. But we have to focus on, the whole world is focused on what's going on in Ukraine, but we say nothing to these other people who are going through the same thing. You let 100,000 Ukrainians come in this country. And I agree with that. That's understandable. But what about those Haitians that y'all beat at the border and denied entry? What about those Mexicans that y'all been denied entry for years? My beef with you is this double standard that you have, this moral duplicity. Some lives matter and some lives don't. You can't speak about social justice. You can't speak about equality when you say nothing about what's going on in your state. You say nothing about the atrocities that are being committed, the legal atrocities, the legal assassinations. We might not have a knee on our neck or have died by a police bullet, but we're dying by long prison sentences. We're dying by virtual death sentences. And we haven't seen our day in court. We haven't been tried in front of a jury of our peers. So I say, Mr. President, when are you going to get serious about these issues? Let's stop this symbolic gesturing and this posturing and make it seem like you care about us. Get serious about this. This is real. My letter to the President.